that actually brings us to the last content part of our session, and it's a very interesting one. The gentleman who is being featured today here, along with another amazing clinician right here from the Bay Area, is a celebrity. He's a celebrity who performs in front of 10,000 people crowds. You know, good thing is that each of us is equivalent to 1,000 people, right? He has flown over the last 1 week. I saw his performance in Delhi 7 days back, exactly 7 days back. In those 7 days, he has flown to South Africa, done 2 concerts. He flew to Geneva, where he did 1 or 2, I don't know, to 1 concert. He went back to India, and he came to the US day before. Yesterday, actually, he came yesterday. And he goes back to Delhi or Bangalore after this. So in 1 week, he would have had, I don't know, 10 flights or 11 international flights. Phenomenal. So I'm just going to quickly introduce him, and I'm going to let him have the stage. I'll introduce Dr. Bruce Miller after that, but let me invite Ricky Kej. Let's just invite him with a big round of applause. Ricky is a 3-time Grammy Award winner and US Billboard #1 artist. He is United Nations Goodwill Ambassador, GQ Man of the Year. You can see he's dressed up really, really well. Pretty handsome. He's an internationally renowned Indian music. He has put Indian music on the map at par with a lot of other stalwarts that have come before him. He has performed in over 35 countries in prestigious venues, including at United Nations headquarters. He's been awarded a Global Humanitarian Artist Award, as well as Ban Ki-moon Award. Multiple parliaments have honored him as well. But the part that's most relevant for us here today, and I'm hoping he'll talk about that, and Dr. Bruce Miller will talk to him about that, is the work he does in climate change, planetary health, and human health. He has been working on using his music to message, around global health, public health, mental health, climate health, which directly connects with human health for over a decade. If you go look at his albums, his performances, they all actually speak to these themes. In fact, the concert that I attended in Delhi was very much focused on climate change and climate health. So it's really a privilege and an honor to host Ricky Kej, whom I call dear friend. Ricky, please join us up on stage.
Internationally renowned Indian music composer and environmentalist, a US Billboard #1 artist,
3 times Grammy Award winner. He's won over 100 awards. Ricky Kej.
It's time to shine a light. Let's do this.
Ricky Kej, champion for nature.
I take this opportunity to say thank you to Ricky Kej. Ricky has been inspiring and is one of our champions.
My brother Ricky, I'm really proud of you as always.
We are all in this together. We are all in this together. And nothing can remind us. Like I said,
and the Grammy goes to Winds of Samsara.
I'd like to thank the Recording Academy. Asatoma Satgamaya Om Shanti 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 Om. Thank you.
And the Grammy goes to Stuart Copeland.
In India, we've got a saying called as Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, which literally means the world is one family. Live in peace with all entities on this planet, whether it is the animals, the wildlife, the forest.
it's time to shine your.
Stuart Copeland, the right side, and Ricky Kej.
It's our time. Let's do this.
Namaste and thank you. Climate change is absolutely real. Climate change is human-induced, and our actions are affecting countries on the other side of the world.
It is time.
And now, presenting 3-time Grammy Award winner, United Nations Goodwill Ambassador, Ricky Kej.
Let me now invite his conversation partner for the day, Dr. Bruce Miller. He's a Bay Area native. He is a distinguished professor, A.W. and Mary Margaret Clausen Distinguished Professor of Neurology, at UCSF. He directs the UCSF Memory and Aging Center, so very relevant to the conversation that we're going to have about music and brain health. He's the founding director of Global Brain Health Institute at UCSF, and helps lead Tau Consortium and the Bluefield Foundation. He focuses on precision medicine around brain health. He's a behavioral neurologist. He's been featured in a number of magazines, has a large number of papers, 1,100 publications actually. I just saw the number. But most importantly, for today's conversation, Bruce is a major fan of music and its effect on brain health. I'll leave those two amazing gentlemen to the conversation. Let's just do a huge round of applause for both of them. Thank you.
So what an honor to be with you today.
All mine.
Many of you know Ricky Kej's music, and they're people that change the world in little ways, and then there are people who change the world in big ways. And I just want to comment on brain health, because I think we'll touch on a lot on this, but music is so incredibly important now, we realize, for building the brain, for protecting the brain from disorders of mental health, and also the degenerative diseases that I study. So in this very special place of music, Ricky is central as a healer. The other side of this that I think is so remarkable that one man will do both is he is focusing our societies on air pollution. And we are increasingly, this has popped up as a major risk factor for Alzheimer's disease, other degenerative diseases. And just as in many societies like our own, dementia rates are starting to decline because of us taking care of our brain and our body, the air pollution becomes a major threat. So where would you like to start, Ricky? Say some about your work with air pollution and what is your perspective on this?
First of all, namaste, everyone. It's a huge honor for me to be over here, especially speaking with you, Dr. Bruce. So for me, ever since I remember, even during my childhood, ever since I remember, I've always been a musician. So that's something that I don't remember a time when I was not a musician. I do not remember a time when I was not playing a musical instrument, and along with being a musician, I've always been an environmentalist, even before I knew the meaning of what the word was. And so these are two pillars that have pretty much dictated my whole life and every single life decision that I've ever made. And it's for the last few years, maybe the last about 15 years, that these two parts of mine, the environmental side of mine and social impact around those areas, and of course the musical side of me, came together. And I decided that every single piece of music that I make is going to be about, in my own small, tiny capacity, of trying to make this world a better place and trying to improve human health. Now, when it comes to not just air pollution, but when it comes to all the problems that we face on our planet, I believe that the biggest threat to us, and these problems could be environmental problems, it could be social problems, it could be health issues. I believe that the biggest threat to us as a species is the constant thought that we have that somebody else will make a difference, that we're always waiting for governments to make a difference, intergovernmental bodies and corporations and leaders to make a difference, when the truth is that the only way we can bring about meaningful change is if we bring about small incremental changes within our own lives. And that is extremely important, especially when it comes to air pollution, that we need to bring about small, tiny changes within our own lives. And that not just air pollution, but any kind of pollution. And the thing is that we always treat ourselves as being very insignificant in terms of that, that we feel that, okay, if I reduce my use of fossil fuels, what difference will it make, Or if I reduce my use of single-use plastics, what difference will it make? Or if I'm just compassionate, what difference will it make? But the truth is that we need to make these small, tiny, incremental changes within our lives, and that's the only way we'll be able to bring about any kind of meaningful change. Because we constantly talk about changing the world, but we very rarely talk about changing ourselves. And that is where I believe that music can play that very important catalyst, because what happens is that we can showcase a huge amount of scientific data to the general population. And the scientific data is extremely important, but that scientific data alone is not going to bring about changes in people's mindsets, nor is showcasing a whole lot of analytics and, and statistics. But what is extremely important is for musicians and artists to take these complex ideas and thoughts and collaborate with scientists, and collaborate with people who understand what the problems of our world are, and people who know the solutions to these problems or who are trying to figure out these solutions, and collaborate with them and communicate through the language of music so that we are hitting the hearts and souls of people, and we are touching them emotionally. And I believe that that is what can actually change mindsets and bring about behavioral change. So I think what needs to happen is that more and more scientists need to collaborate with more and more artists, so that the scientists do what they are fantastic at doing, and the artists help the scientists communicate these messages to the general population. So that's what I try to do through air pollution. I did this project with the WHO, with Dr. Tedros, which was called Breathe Life. Now, Breathe Life was all about, it was at the heart of it, it is about climate change, and it's about air pollution. But at the same time, it talks about the health effects of climate change or of air pollution. Because at the end of the day, what happens is that, and it's unfortunate that the narratives of climate change are usually about the environment, about a polar bear may or may not die, after 5 or 6 years, or polar ice caps melt, and this does not connect with people. But if you talk to people about that, that 600,000 children are dying every single year due to air pollution, or 7 million people die out of 7 million people all over the world die due to air pollution, or your children can be suffering from bronchitis or asthma or lung cancer because of air pollution, then that is something that has a more immediate effect. And if we can showcase this through an emotional, through emotional art forms, and that is what will encourage people to bring about behavioral change, and that's what we did through that campaign.
Oh, I have one.
You've got your own mic.
Okay.
You can move both your hands while you're speaking.
What a beautiful story. And at our Global Brain Health Institute at UCSF, which was funded by a philanthropist, Chuck Feeney, the idea is improving brain health across the world, particularly in underserved regions. And we train together artists and scientists. You are the ultimate example of this. Someone who's trained in engineering, who understands the science, yet motivates people to do something, very important about the environment. And, we're just beginning to understand how devastating these changes are. With Alzheimer's disease, we have learned that little particulates in the air can go to the brain, bind the amyloid protein, and lead to the cascade of Alzheimer's disease. So every concert that you do you talk about the climate? Is this part of your music? Is this part of the story that you relay?
Definitely. Every single concert of mine speaks about various topics when it comes to the environment and social impact. Because the thing is that, as I said, from a very young age, I've been an environmentalist, and that as a small child, I was called a weird child by my parents and by my friends, because I realized that I liked hanging around with animals rather than human beings. And these are not the regular, the so-called sexy animal species like lions and tigers and things like that. I'm talking about frogs and snakes and lizards and the so-called creepy crawly and dangerous animals. Yes. So I loved hanging around with them. I used to think of them as being my brothers and sisters, and that if I have to go deeper into that, I was always told as a child that as soon as you see any of these animals, then you're supposed to run away from them or just step on them and, and kill them immediately. And my question as a very young child to my parents would be that if you're supposed to kill them immediately, then why do they exist? They obviously have some purpose. And now we all realize that every single species of animal, no matter how seemingly insignificant, is a really important part of the ecosystem. And it's this delicate balance of the ecosystem that keeps all of us alive. But nevertheless, in my, while growing up in India, especially a country like India, which is still a developing nation and it's in the global south, the thing about India is that after traveling the length and breadth of India and after sensitizing myself to the ground realities in India, I realized that no problem can be taken in complete isolation. Even though my focus was the environment, I started realizing that, in a country like India, you cannot have the regular Western narratives when it comes to climate change. Like, for example, the Western narratives are consume less of everything. But then in India, if you go to a village which is completely steeped in poverty, you cannot tell people consume less of everything because, first of all, they do not have much to consume. No. And you cannot say, let's make a better future for our future generations, because then you cannot skip the current generation. Everybody's got dreams. Everybody's got their own aspirations. So, and everything is interrelated because education is related to climate change. It's the same thing with poverty. It's the same thing with hunger. It's the same thing with gender inequality, gender violence. Everything is interrelated. Gender inequality is related to migration, which is related to land desertification, which is related to climate change. So then that is when I realized that in order to reach my goal of mitigating the effects of climate change, I need to solve a whole lot of other problems in my own tiny way. I'm not speaking in a very delusional way. But what I'm saying is that in my own small way, I need to have a very holistic approach towards problem solving, and that is where health came into the picture, because I realized that health plays an extremely important role in all of this, because there is this. If I have to go a little bit into spirituality, there is this very important Buddhist quote which really took to me. I mean, I took to it very, very strongly. This Buddhist quote says that, and I'm paraphrasing, I do not know the exact quote, but that the imbalances and the impurities of the environment is in direct relation with the impurities of the mind. And in order to purify the environment and society around us, we first have to purify the mind. And that is where my journey into mental health started, because I realized that my music needs to be representative of mental health in order to reach my goals.
Amazing. Thank you. That certainly deserves applause and awe. I want to talk a little bit with you. You've thought in a very deep way about music, emotion, ancient Indian music, connecting to that. Just a comment, and then I'd love for you to say how important this is. So, as Amarok said, I love music, and Ricky and I have talked about. He is now on my 150 people that I listen to when I take a run in the morning. The run is good for the brain. The music is good for the brain. It is not just medicines that we're going to produce, and you technologists are going to produce them. It's really important. We're at a stage now where CRISPR will, I believe, have a major curative effect in Alzheimer's. But how we live our lives is also critically important. And we now know that we release neurokines. These are little proteins when we listen to music, when we run, that activate the brain, that diminish anxiety. I do all my problem solving running and listening to music. I am calm and I can deal with immense problems. At least I think they're immense. You might not think they're so immense. But talk to us about how someone who was graced at birth with this special musical ability, how you create the music, how you think about the audience that will be experiencing it, and the emotions that go into this?
So actually, that's quite. I mean, that's an excellent question, and also there are many answers to it. So firstly, and I had this short discussion on one of the tables over here with a few delegates that, everybody has got a different style of music that brings them calm. Like for example, with me, sometimes if I've got a little bit of anger or stress in me, sometimes heavy metal music works for me because I grew up listening to heavy metal as a child, and sometimes listening to ambient music helps me. The ambient and the so-called calming music sometimes helps me. Like musicians like Steve Roach or Enya or Enigma, that kind of music also calms me. Because sometimes I've realized, at least in my life, that if I'm feeling absolute anger, and if I listen to heavy metal, it helps me channelize that anger, and it helps me channelize that anger away from and it helps me focus away from the very fact that I was feeling angry about, in the first place, So sometimes you have to listen to the kind of music that you are feeling right now, and it helps you channelize that anger. Like if I'm feeling sad, sometimes I feel that listening to sad music helps me feel a little better, actually, rather than listening to, so-called happy music. And sometimes the opposite works. But at the same time, I've got this new album that is out. It's called Break of Dawn. It's an album that we released with Universal Music. And this album is sort of like a culmination of everything that I've learned and everything that I've personally researched when it comes to mental health. Because what I've done is that I've gone back to my roots of Indian classical music. And every single song in this particular album, there are 9 songs in the album, every single song is based on a different Indian classical rag. Now, for people who do not know what rags are, in Western music, you've got scales. Basically notes that make up a scale, and if you want to improvise on a particular melody, then the scales form a sort of like a framework within which you can create a melody or you can improvise. So rags are far more definitive versions of scales, where you have a certain set of, a certain style of descending notes, a certain style of ascending notes, and sometimes the order of those descending notes and the ascending notes are also, predetermined. And also, in Western notes, you just have 12 notes, which you play on a piano or you play on a guitar or any other instrument. In rags, what happens is that you've got the 12 notes, but in a scale, you've got about 7 notes. But basically, you have the 12 notes of the musical 12 notes. But at the same time, you've got these microtones between these 12 notes, which cannot be written down, on a sheet of music. But at the same time, they need to be felt, while you're playing a certain rag or you're improvising within a certain rag. So let's say if I were to compose a piece of music in a particular rag, let's say rag Hamir, if I'm supposed to compose a piece of music on that, then what happens is that, I have to compose that piece of music within that definitive scale or that particular rag. But the way that Indian classical music works is that if you know the rag really well, and if you understand the rag, and if you feel the rag, then actually the rag does not limit you within your composition. It actually frees you, And it frees you to just express yourself in any way possible, but within that particular rag. So when it comes to the Western scales, it almost puts you in a sort of like a prison where you're constantly thinking about the notes, and you're thinking that, okay, these are the notes in this particular scale, and I cannot go outside of this. If I go outside of these notes, then I'm going off key. But the way the Indian classical rags have been built and how they've been created over many hundreds of years is that you feel free when you're actually playing within that rag, and you do not feel the limitations of that rag, and you can probably improvise on a musical instrument for hours together, and you can express yourself through that particular rag. So that's what I did. I chose a different rag for every single song, and these are rags which are known to sort of like unclutter your mind and to bring a soothing feeling to yourself. And let's just put it this way: when you finish listening to the album, all 9 songs, you'll be in a far better mood than you were when you started listening to the album.
Amazing. What I've learned from you is that this happened very early in India, that this music was part of the society many, many thousands of years
Yeah,
ago.
it predates. Yeah, Indian classical music predates Western classical music by many, many centuries.
Incredible. And these early people who created this music, how important do you think emotion was in the need, the necessity to create music and song and dance?
No, emotion is everything when it comes to music at the end of the day. Because, like, for example, we have all of these awards. I've won 3 Grammys. Now, the Grammy Awards are always based on the genre of music. Best rock song, best pop song, best new age song, best jazz song. And I feel that is a very wrong way to classify music. Because you can have happy music which can cut across genres of music. So you can have a happy jazz song, you can have a happy rock song, you can have a happy world music song, you can have a happy, country music song. Now the thing is that if you are defining music based on genres, it means that I am completely imprisoned by that genre. So then you are sort of like stating that I have to make a rock song. And, so then I've just got a choice of about 5 or 6 instruments that I can use in that particular song. Or if I'm creating a jazz song, there are about maybe 10 or 11 instruments that I can possibly use for that particular jazz song. And I'm limited with those instruments. Whereas I would just like to create a happy song, and I don't care what instrument goes into it, whether it's a sitar that goes into it, or a gospel choir, or an Indian classical vocal, or a Vietnamese dan bao. For me, I don't want those limitations. I just want to use whatever medium, whatever culture, whatever musical tradition, and just create that song which is expressing what is in my head. And so I believe that genres are no longer the right classification for music. It should be the emotion that the musician intends for the end listener to have. So I would say that we should classify music based on the end emotional result. And that is where Indian music or any kind of ancient musical form, whether it is Chinese music or whether it's a Korean classical music, not K-pop, but the Korean classical musical forms, or any ancient musical form, whether it's the Latin ancient forms of music or whether it's indigenous forms of music anywhere in the world. I believe that is based on emotion, because if you think about it, how did music start in the first place? Music started off as sounds from nature. Sounds of the birds, sounds of the animals, sounds of the trees, sounds of the wind, sounds of the raindrops. And then later on, we human beings started imitating those sounds and trying to make them more pleasing for the human ear. And then later on, we started pulling objects from nature and creating musical instruments from there, like, bamboo flutes and boxes of seeds and animal skin as percussion instruments and bowls of water and stuff like that. And it's only actually for the last maybe few thousand years in the case of India, and in the case of Western civilization, maybe 1,000 years, that music actually became academic with notes and scales and rags and things like that, where we started defining what music is. But if you look at any indigenous culture, living culture anywhere in the world, which is still a living culture, their music is still orally passed down from generation to generation. It's not documented. It's usually orally passed down from generation to generation. It's all based on feel. It's all based on emotion. And it's usually about nature. It's usually about the environment around them. And it's usually also still imitating sounds from nature. So that, I think, is an extension of what Indian classical music became, where everything is about expression, just like how jazz music is in America. That it's all about expressing yourself through your music and bringing about an emotion through the musical instrument and just breathing through the musical instrument. And so I guess everything is about emotion for me when it comes to music, because at the end of the day, if you do not elicit an emotional response from the end listener, the music has failed.
Beautiful. I think I think we've learned from imaging the brain in people participating or listening to music that there are very parallel systems that lie on top of language systems. And it's, I think, no coincidence that often lyrics are part of music, sometimes not. But say a little bit about language and music, and are you thinking verbally when you were creating, or is language turned off?
Actually, yes, that's a very good question because language is usually turned off.
Yeah.
But at the same time, there are a couple of comparisons that I'd like to make over here since you brought it up. Any fans of Harry Potter over here? Okay. How many of you felt that the movie did justice to the books? No. Okay, fine. So what happened was that the books itself were extremely visually evocative, So they conjured up all of these images in our heads, so much so that the movie could not live up to the expectations of what everybody had in their heads. It's the same thing with music that I feel, that when it comes to instrumental music, it is so open to interpretation. Yeah. And it is so visually evocative that as soon as you put lyrics to it, then you are defining what the intent of the musician is. And it sort of brings a face to the music. And so I prefer instrumental music in that way. And when I have lyrics in my music, I usually choose the language of Sanskrit, which is basically an ancient, Indian language said to be one of the most ancient languages ever in the world. Because that language, the Sanskrit language, has got the beauty that it is, number one, it's open to interpretation, the language. And second thing is that there is musicality and there is rhythm built into the language and built into the words. So even if you recite a verse in Sanskrit, it is automatically musical even if you do not sing it. So that is why I use a lot of Sanskrit in my music. I also compose a lot of music which has got words too, because sometimes I want the definition to be clear of what I'm intending. But I prefer instrumental music. Now, when it comes to creating music to calm the mind, now, the most calming sound, in my opinion, even more calming than music, is the sounds of nature. Like going into a forest, and I spend a lot of time in the forest. So going into the forest and just listening, like for example, I'll give you one specific example. Like there is this place called Kabini, which is a forest which is very close to where I live in Bangalore, in Karnataka. It's part of the Western Ghats, which is also considered to be one of the lungs of our planet, along with the Amazon and the Indonesian rainforests. It's also got the species endemic to the Western Ghats, that particular forest. The number of species that are endemic to the Western Ghats only parallels the number of species that are endemic to the Amazon. Wow. It's one of the top 10 biodiversity hotspots in the world. I love that place. So the thing is that when I walk around in the forest at night, and I wouldn't recommend anybody do that, but when I walk around the forest at night, you hear the sounds of the crickets. They sound absolutely beautiful. They sound calming, and it's a beautiful sound. But if I record that sound and I play it over here on a sound system, it's going to sound terrible, because somehow the atmosphere of the forest and the air in the forest, the feeling that you have in the forest, makes the cricket sound amazing. Maybe it's a limitation in recording technology that we are just not able to replicate that sound and that emotion of the forest through the sound in an urban landscape through the recording technology and the playback technology that we have. So when I try to interpret the sounds of nature, because most of my music is just interpreting the sounds of nature. So what I liken that to the difference between taking a photograph and making a painting. Now, let's say if I were to take a photograph of you right now, then based on the current lighting conditions, it would be a verbatim image of that particular moment. But if I were to make a painting of you, I would bring in a little bit of your personality into it. It would be open to interpretation, open to a little bit of artistic interpretation. So that's what I do with the sounds of nature. I absorb the sounds of nature when I go into the forest, and then I interpret those sounds through a bamboo flute, through a sitar, through a string section, through an orchestra, through a piano, so that I get that emotion that I felt while I was in the forest out to a listener. So I think that interpreting the sounds of nature becomes more important. And Beethoven was very famous for doing that. There are numerous instances which have been recorded in history where Beethoven has said that all that he does is basically he goes out into nature and he listens to the sounds of nature and he writes that on a sheet of paper and he creates these orchestral, these symphonies. And in fact, his symphony called the Pastoral Symphony not only interpreted the beauty of nature, but also the chaotic elements of nature. And to me, that was his best symphony ever. That is the Pastoral Symphony. Because when you listen to it, you immediately feel that, that this is all about nature, and it's all about the chaos and the beauty of nature.
I hope people listen very carefully to that. I think this is a really very unique. Beethoven may have done it, but not many others. And I think that Ricky Kej is, translating experience in the environment, which we all need so desperately, and translating that into music, I think is one of the really remarkable aspects of what you do. So, yeah. We talked a little bit about what our scientist at UCSF, Virginia Sturm, has called awe walks. And what she did is she took depressed caregivers and asked them to walk in nature and take a picture of themselves after the walk was over. And it had remarkable effects. I think if we had added music to it, it would have even been more powerful. But it had a powerful change in mood that lasted for the duration of the study. The other remarkable thing is, and this is a very selfless person, I think, is the pictures that the people took after they had gone on the awe walks featured themselves much less and featured what they could live in the environment. So I think it's a very spiritual process that you talk about. You talked about crossing genres, and I want to just ask you about your composition with Stuart Copeland, because this, I think, is a really living example of taking a very different style of musician and working together. How did that change you? How did it change him?
For me, it was a life-changing experience working with Stuart Copeland. So for those of you who do not know who he is, Stuart Copeland is considered to be the greatest drummer in the history of music. He was the drummer of the band The Police, and also he's composed some of the most famous film scores, done over 50 Hollywood movies, including Wall Street and Highlander, I Am David, and Rumblefish, and all of these movies. So a brilliant, absolutely brilliant musician. And so how it started off was that during the pandemic, I started creating a few pieces of music. And I wanted a collaborator on that particular album. And I was a huge fan of Stuart Copeland. In fact, a diehard fan of his. I grew up with posters of him on my wall. And I realized that, all right, this is the pandemic. All of us are locked at home. Maybe, he'll agree to work with me. So I reached out to him. And I sent him some of my music. And quite astonishingly, in about 2 or 3 weeks, he called me back and he said that I listened to the music, I loved it, let's work on this album together. So we ended up working a year together on the album. And another reason why I wanted to get in touch with him was that, to actually do this album, was that I'd read about him that through all his journeys all over the world, he had collected a whole lot of so-called exotic musical instruments from many, many countries all over the world. And he's known as a rock drummer, And he had collected all these instruments from everywhere in the world, and he loved playing with them. And in fact, he created a studio which was built around these instruments called the Sacred Grove. But he never recorded these instruments professionally. So I felt that this would give him an opportunity to actually record all of these instruments rather than just the drum kit. So that's exactly what he did. We co-wrote the album together. We produced the album together, worked 1 year. I changed my sleep timings to match his because he is in Los Angeles, I was in Bangalore. And so I had to sleep during the daytime and stay awake at night so that we could work together remotely on the album. At the end of 1 year, we had the album ready. And collaborating with him was quite a challenge, but a good challenge, simply because he's an absolute legend, a far, far superior musician than me, a far, far superior composer than me. Now, the thing is that up until then, I was always in control of my own music. I was the one who was the decision maker. I was the one who would decide what the compositions were, how the music would be recorded. In this case, I would have to lose control. So I decided that this is how I'm going to work with Stuart. I'm going to do exactly what he asks me to do, even if I feel it is wrong. If he tells me to do something, if he tells me that, okay, record this particular instrument or change this or this is how we're going to do stuff, even if I feel in my heart that this is the wrong way to go about it, I'm just going to go ahead and do it. I'm going to live with that decision for 2 weeks.
Wonderful.
Okay? And at the end of 2 weeks, if I still feel that it's a wrong decision, I'm going to voice my opinion. Now, it happened numerous times during the 1 year that I felt that what he was asking me to do was absolutely ridiculous. I would wait for 2 weeks, and there was not a single situation where I needed to voice my opinion.
Really?
Every single time that I waited for the 2 weeks,
Yes.
I realized that, thank God, I did not voice my opinion.
Wow.
Because sometimes, you end up falling in love with everything that you do, and you do not, and your brain makes you incapable of looking at things from a different perspective. And time helps with that.
Nice.
If you spend some time with it, then you start realizing that, you start realizing that, all right, this other perspective actually works.
Amazing.
Because then you stop, So that's what I did, and and the album was ready. Album was done, and then we released the album. The album was hugely successful, and then we won a whole lot of awards all over the world, and that culminated with us getting nominated for the Grammy Award. And I've not even met Stuart in person up until then.
Wow.
So, because that's what the pandemic was all about, right? I'd not even meet him at all. And in fact, we became really close friends. He became almost like I would say a father figure to me. And I was going through a lot of personal turmoil at that time. He was helping me out with that. So we bonded a lot during that time. And then when we got nominated, we decided that, all right, we'll meet in Las Vegas for the Grammy Awards ceremony. And but Stuart said, no, I've got this concert at Nashville a few days before the Grammy, so you fly into Nashville, let's meet over there. So I went to Nashville, met him over there for the first time, hugged him for the first time, so it was a very emotional experience for me. Then we went to Los Angeles, met him and his wife and his family over there for a brief period. Then we went to Vegas. And up until then, and I'm just going to take a minute to explain this because it's a very important thing, but up until then, because this was, I was up for my second Grammy. I'd already won a Grammy before that. So up until then, the rule that the Grammys had was that you get 2 minutes on stage, and any number of people can speak during that 2 minutes, but they will shut off your mic at exactly 2 minutes. They start playing you off at 1 minute and 50 seconds. They'll start playing some music, and exactly at 2 minutes, they'll shut off your mic because it's a live telecast. They cannot take chances. So, and if there are 5 members in the band, all 5 can speak as long as it is within 2 minutes. They changed the rules that year. They said it is 60 seconds, and only one person can speak. So if one person speaks for 5 seconds, a second person cannot come up and take the rest of the time. So basically, it's only one person and 60 seconds. So I told Stuart, you have to speak. Stuart said, no, you initiated the album, you should speak. Then I told him, no, it's better that you praise me rather than I praise myself. So he agreed. And then we sat in the audience, and then the celebrity opens up the envelope, and our names are called out as the winners. So then we go up on stage, and when we're going up on stage, Stuart notices that the conductor the conductor who plays off people, off the stage, is a person he knew really well. So he goes up on stage, Stuart makes a very quick 5-second joke, and then he says that this album is all about Ricky. This album was initiated by him. It's all his work. So Ricky, please take the mic. And I was immediately shocked. I'm like, they're going to play me off, And Stuart looks at the conductor, and all of this is on YouTube. Stuart looks at the conductor and shouts at him, don't you dare. And then he tells me, Ricky, say whatever you want to say. I did not prepare a speech, but then I've spoken about Divine Tides, the album, so many times, so I knew what I was going to say. So I spoke about the album, and I spoke about what it meant. And throughout that entire speech, Stuart was only looking at the conductor, and he had his finger, you're not going to play the music. And only he can demand something like that. So I finished off my speech, and that was the end of that. Now, we've just completed our third album. It's called Wild Concerto, which is going to be releasing in April next year. That's so basically, we've developed this beautiful working relationship, and I'm extremely grateful that I get to work with a person like him. Yeah.
Fantastic. And maybe that 1 minute cutoff and that wait for 15 minutes for 2 weeks would be a good lesson for our politicians, right?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Thank you.